Okay.
Time pressure.
Okay, we are live on February 16th in Senate Economic Development. We have Alan in the witness chair. We went through the language on pages 4 and 5. I know that we'll need to revisit this section and potentially look at new language, but it would be nice to try and get through the rest. So that, yes.
With Ellen here, are we
Mhm.
hoping to get to the Act 250 sections, which
We're hoping
have
to,
some
yes.
of our thorniest concern, you know, some
Yes,
of
yes.
most concerns, and
That if we move, we get there.
Okay, okay.
Otherwise, we take a little to do it.
okay,
So
so is that your hope to try and?
my hope
yeah.
is this is the last time we have Ellen in the chair unless we schedule more time next, before next week.
Oh, fine.
Yeah.
We may
so-
need more time. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So we're on bottom of page 7 is the next highlighted area, unless there was something we needed to.
No, I think we were all zooming along.
Page 7.
Yes.
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. We're looking at draft 7.2. Page 7 starts the definition section. So very small changes here that I just want to make sure that I captured the committee's intent on. So there's a new definition, number 38, which is accessory dwelling unit, but I just added the cross-reference to the
Right.
definition in the prior section. This is sort of minor, but it's sort of a grammar thing. So if you want to have it here, you can.
Right, I think it's important to clarify that.
And then I added it to the duplex definition. So duplex means a residential building that has 2 dwelling units in the same building and is not an accessory dwelling unit.
Yes, Senator Harris.
Quick thing, do we want to say, and neither is an accessory unit? So that it's clear that each
Yeah, that's an interesting-
of the units is not an accessory
Oh,
dwelling
because
unit?
it's 2.
Because it's 2.
I thought that was like fancy, old English or something. Yes. That,
It's two relatively equal.
Well, we talked about that. but-
Yeah, and I just want to say one more time, I think 2-unit dwelling is preferable to duplex. But I'm not gonna,
we went around.
yeah, I'm
around,
just.
But thank you for
That's why
registering your
that's
concern.
actually why I put it in bold.
Right.
Like it was a question mark.
Right.
Yeah.
For me. But I do think, and neither of which is an accessory dwelling.
Yeah.
That sounds
Yeah.
better,
Okay,
yes.
yes.
If you want to keep thinking about it, totally welcome to. I feel like I can't remember exactly the conversation, but I feel like we went around and around on this.
We did.
It's hard to do anything otherwise.
I think because final analysis consistent with planners language elsewhere in statutes,
Right.
and
Just
just
keep defining
consistency and not introducing a new term that needed definition.
Right, that was the reasoning for the 2 dwelling.
As I recall.
Yes, thank you for
We
recalling.
didn't change anything in the
Yeah, I did want to flag,
Mhm.
I didn't know if you were still looking to add any clarity on the emergency shelter definition.
we are still expecting, I asked for today. Legal aid and the state Office of Economic Opportunity were talking about making sure that motels fit into this definition as well.
Okay, where we say they have to put emergency shelters,
We didn't change the location.
okay, but where is,
So it was on page 6, or,
Oh, you're saying where's the
on
language?
page 7. So that language is in section 3. And what it's doing is towns are limited in how much zoning
Restriction.
review they can put on emergency shelters.
They can't regulate daily or seasonal hours of operation.
okay, CK, all right, but we're not saying they have to allow them in all
No,
areas, okay.
they have to provide a location for shelters, but they don't have to allow them everywhere.
Senator Harrison.
Something we might want to consider, thank you, is to have emergency shelter defined as something that is a service that's funded by the Agency of Human Services.
I think we heard from some shelters that have
are not funded by?
Well, they're not, that's not their main funding source. I don't know if, I think that would open up, if you could, sometimes things can have huge unintended consequences.
Sure.
Someone comes in and they're like, now we can't exist or
They're a
something.
nonprofit. and their
Right.
Major funding source is not in the state.
Mhm. Samaritan House.
We've also, okay, this won't take in. We had a group that was buying a single family home and using it to house recovering alcoholics and the neighbors
Yeah,
were a little upset.
I'm hoping the House looks at recovery housing, which we may not resolve this year. but-
Let's clarify that, because I do know that the supportive housing and recovery housing are a priority.
Yeah,
And I thought they were taking it up. for
well, they've
some
just started on their housing bill, so all I can say is the clarification needs to be that it needs to go there, since we
Okay.
won't have time for that.
So
So then I'm not suggesting a change right now because I don't know the impact of that change.
Okay, great.
Okay, so the next section is, does not have a change in it, but I was suspecting there may be a proposed change. So starting on page 8 into page 9 is section 5. So this is the directive that towns submit specific information when they update their bylaws. So there isn't a change here. I didn't know if you wanted to, I didn't know what do you want to go to the next change or did you want to talk about?
Does anyone have a change? We can flag things, but we can't like fully vet them in here right now without language. I'm kind of looking your way, Senator Harrison, because
Right,
it has the geo
right,
data.
right. I have gotten confirmation from other folks that that is a potential burden to the town.
Mhm.
The
Not,
geodata
not
addition.
making the bylaw or adopting the bylaw, but actually uploading the data.
Okay.
And I think it's unfair to put that burden on the town. Some towns, I'm sure, are perfectly able to do it. But I would suggest that it say something about the towns providing the information to the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Okay.
Well,
Senator Cruz.
does it make any sense to have the towns working in conjunction with their regional planning
That's
commission?
Definitely,
Yeah.
Because
definitely.
I mean, the smaller towns will need them.
right,
I mean,
right.
we could call that out if you want.
This was, it's something about confirmed it was uploaded, which they said they do with the RPCs, but if you want to soften the language, I flagged it. I think, what you just said is fine with me. I don't know if anybody has objections, and maybe you could specify the language with Alan.
Sure. And I'm not even sure it needs to be in statute. What's important is that the bylaw process be in statute, and then how it's administered
Right.
functionally.
Will be different for every
Yeah,
town.
Right,
so It
right.
just needs to be done.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
but did we hear any testimony that said it wasn't being done?
I don't believe this is a requirement now.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not a code.
But there is a contract, and maybe it's just not administered even across RPCs.
Yes.
Okay.
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 So I will check that. Okay. I need to make a list.
This just says confirmed that it's been uploaded.
Right, but the expectation when we talked to staff was that the towns would
Would do it.
be expected to upload it. And I just think that's a,
I think there are towns that until the Secretary of State made them get computers, didn't have computers.
right. And it's important that this data be accurate and
Yeah.
complete. It'll be good information for us.
Right. Okay. Hurry us along a little bit, just so we have
Yes.
flagged everything that Alan, that might still be me and Alan back, but
Yeah.
we should try to get through everything throughout.
So page 10 and 11, there's no new language in it. However, these sections are longer because I've included the rest of the section so that you can see the list of other people who still have the
Thank
right
you.
to appeal a municipal decisions.
Oh, we so talked about that.
Yeah, so this isn't changing, it's just showing the rest of the list of people, which I appreciate it.
So sorry, where,
So starting on page 10,
oh, okay, we're on that, sorry, moving on.
and so then on page,
These are zoning appeals,
yes.
and this is our 10 or few, right, this is. we
Yeah.
changed.
So on page 12, this is the section about subdivision plat review. So a couple of small changes here. Before a plat for a subdivision is approved, public hearing on the plat may be held by the appropriate municipal panel after public notice. A bylaw may provide for when a public hearing is required. And so the words major and minor have removed and just given the town the ability to decide when and what types of plats they want to hold hearings on.
Gives them more flexibility and an opportunity to approve smaller plats as opposed to they can set their own threshold.
Right, and some towns have already started doing that, but this is making it very clear that they have that authority. Right. Okay, and the next change is on page 14, which is still related to this. So the word minor subdivision was removed on page 14, line 6. So it's just administrative officers are allowed to approve subdivisions as described in the bylaws. Keep going. The next section is on page 14. It's section 9. This is the clarification of character of the area appeals. And so there is no change in this section either.
And this means that in these areas, you cannot appeal on character of the area.
Past the administrative, past the town's decision.
Right,
Yes.
after the town determines that the character is not a problem. Other folks cannot appeal. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
So the town determines and appeal, and once that happens, there are no appeals to the town's decision.
Yes. So on page 15,
Do you have anything else that municipalities can do that's not subject to appeal anywhere? I'm assuming that you can appeal to the courts, could you not? Or are we saying that you can't do that even?
so this section is specifically about the appeal from the municipality to the court. And so I think there are certain actions a town can take that aren't directly appealable, like decisions related to the municipal plan, but they're usually not things that are how do I say this? All like zoning related decisions are appealable, things related to permits and things like that. But some of the planning elements of the plan that are not enforceable, but are more aspirational, are not necessarily appealable. But this is a unique provision like this that is carving out something that cannot be appealed.
And they can still appeal on a number of other elements.
Yes, they can
But
appeal
just
on the.
not simply on the undue adverse effect on the character of the area
Yes.
is not appealable.
Yes.
And I believe that's because we have evidence and experience that that mechanism has been unfairly used.
Extended timelines specifically to.
And it
Right,
is
that's, I mean, there's a
subjective.
reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, obviously it's subjective, and that's one of the problems, but I'm just thinking from the other side of the table, what people who are involved in this are going to think about that and the objections that will be raised and whether any of those objections are in fact valid. When you deny someone the right to appeal, and they ordinarily would have it under other circumstances, it's a
But they, I think
it's a
they
heavy
can
weapon.
still find reasons to appeal. character of a neighborhood is one of those.
Yeah.
But they
no question,
can
it's subjective.
appeal because it's gonna run off and the traffic's gonna pick up in my driveway and there's all kinds of other things you can appeal if you want to.
It's good to have that question answered about the unique nature.
So that's
So
a
are,
question we're gonna find an answer to.
I mean,
I mean, clearly there are other ways to appeal. I mean, I think.
right, we've had this discussion out loud. I have been under the impression a lot of people have been following this. I think getting your towns to continue to follow this, but we have heard from a lot of folks and
I'm just wondering
This one
what the
wasn't
effect of that
someone's cause. Yeah.
is going to be, both on the towns, on the planning process,
Mhm.
on the people involved. I just,
Do you
when I
think-
see something that says you
Yeah.
don't have the right to appeal, period, it just raises a question in my mind about fairness.
Could we, I don't know, could you reach out to Chip Sawyer or,
Yeah, I certainly.
you know, he was very specific.
So
Yeah.
and the only other thing I would add is that this language is existing language, and the only new part is the last sentence, which I think is just the clarification, and that this is a very narrow provision.
Mhm.
And so the only element that you are not allowed to appeal is the character of the area. The other elements are appealable.
and this
And those
is a
are all listed.
conditional use. This is not a permitted use.
Yes, that's primarily where character of the area is used.
Yeah. So good. Okay.
But we've already said you must allow 5 units an acre anywhere you have water and sewer.
Not with some carve outs that we can still work on.
Right, but that's where the biggest concern about character of the neighborhood.
Fair, so we can continue to come back to page 4 and 5. That's probably the heart of.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Okay,
I had a question about.
can we go?
Yes, just on this though, before we go any further,
Yes.
we had asked, I mean, and I know you. Sorry, and I know you have, we've chatted about this, but is it possible for us to have, to go to Ann's point, an updated chart of what's allowed in which of our areas so that we're clearer as we go through this, that we're really clear on all those?
We're definitely gonna have to give Ellen some grace. I mean.
Yeah.
So no, I
She's
appreciate it.
doing
I've been
everything
asked,
else in the
it's
building, I know.
very,
Yeah.
but it's, that is so helpful
Mhm.
because then I can just go to that and I know the answer to Ann's
Well,
question.
I think if someplace like the league probably has
Mhm.
that,
Well,
or regional planning. Because I don't know that, I don't think you can say in high density residential, I mean, there are so many new zoning
Right, yeah.
areas. Might have once been a farm zoning area, I mean,
Mhm.
that to just say, I don't think there's a whole lot, except high density, low density,
Yeah,
there's a difference. But to say that there's any standardization in zoning,
right.
I don't
Right.
think there is.
Well, VLCT is one of the groups we can bring into the conversation
Yeah,
about
I
pages
think
4 and
we
5. But I do want to be really sensitive about, you know, if we're asking Ellen for changes, that has to come
Right.
first, so we can look at those.
no, I'm just,
I'm sure by sometime next week, I mean, she has to help us. And natural resources. Same bill. I mean, like, same time frame for the bill, so, you know, we just have to be really sensitive to that. Page 15, could we?
All right, so on page 15, this is section 10. This is the by right zoning language, and Senator Harrison submitted some language that I do think helps clarifies what is happening here. So a decision rendered by the appropriate municipal panel for a housing development or the housing portion of a mixed-use development shall not require a larger lot size than the minimum as determined in the municipal bylaws, require more parking spaces than the minimum as determined in the municipal bylaws and section 4414, limit the building size to less than that allowed in the municipal bylaws, including reducing the building footprint or height, limit the density of dwelling units to below that allowed in municipal bylaws, and otherwise disallow development to abide by the minimum or maximum applicable municipal standards. So I do think that makes it a little more clear.
Yay. Good. I like it.
And then the next page has the reasons that the town can give for not following this, but it's setting the standard that they can't use the permit decisions to do this.
So that's the objective of this, of the by right.
What is,
Yes, it's so that the town follows what the town established in their
Okay.
bylaws, unless they have a reason that they then need to state.
Sorry to be
Okay.
dense. Did I miss the covenant piece?
No, it's
coming
towards
up.
the end.
Oh, okay. I was
Yeah.
like, where did that go?
I mean, we
Okay.
can jump there.
No, that's
Yeah.
fine. It's just, those are the, these are all the kind of like, you can't use this loophole or this loophole to get around what we've set forth. So as long as we're happy with what we end up setting forth, these are a little bit more of like a housekeeping, like you know, you have an opportunity to argue why you can't do it, but you can't simply use another tool to get around this, whether it's an individual or.
And it speaks to property rights too.
Mhm.
Well, that's
That-
of course the challenge. That's,
Right,
You can't have
right.
all
But
these
once the
decisions changed.
municipality establishes the
Yeah.
standards, you need to abide by your own standards
Yeah.
unless you have a very good reason, is my understanding.
Yeah. So I think the next change came from a Maura Collins
Yes.
suggestion. And this is,
Entirely new.
it's entirely new.
Yes.
It can, if people have a really significant issue with it, we can either workshop it or cut it.
what, the elements of the regional plan?
This is,
Yes.
this is to eventually, and this is Maura's also trying to embed language in here that says, doesn't mean you're building all new housing. This could mean rehabbing existing housing, so it's energy compliant and code building and energy code compliant. But you have to start thinking in some way about your housing needs in your regional and
Outside of your little municipality,
right.
a little bit of thinking
Yeah.
globally.
I can understand the 30% of income on housing, but the 15% on transportation could be very subjective, I would think.
I would, because that was one of the issues that came up last night. There is no public transportation.
So
Most-
then you have to figure out where the people who are gonna buy the houses are gonna work.
Work,
And I'm not sure how easy, once you have broadband everywhere, the game changes entirely. The rise or fall of an individual employer rises, causes to rise and fall. And how do you know that that's where they're gonna work as
Well,
opposed to doing something else?
price of gas would,
Mhm.
I mean,
It's aspirational, but I'm happy to take that piece out if it's.
well, I
I-
think that that's what keeps coming up,
Mhm.
is that if you don't have any, well, the example was given to me last night, East Barry, all right, that's on Route 14. Anyway, it's on a main state route. Just come up. It has an antique mall, a library, there's some housing around it. It used to be a Catholic church, and it's actually Vermont Flannel has taken over one of the old stores, fire station, and an old market that has closed. But it's a tight cluster, yeah. The town has converted, or somebody has, the old market into 6 apartments. At least one has 3 bedrooms, and the other has 2. There's several with 2, and there's some 3s. But there basically is an alley. There's like 3 parking spaces in front. To say that you're gonna have more, they're saying they require 2 parking spaces, all right? You can't do 2 parking spaces there, but you're gonna have 2 cars. You can't get out of town into Barry. There's no employer in that town. The antique mall's closed all winter. So they're saying, but they're gonna park somewhere and they need to be able to deal with that. And if they knew they were not gonna be able to deal with parking, you wouldn't have gotten your 3-bedroom apartments.
So is this a suggestion?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with this because this is asking our regional planning commissions to do the work of thinking, which I think most of them are already doing.
It's a good reminder, this is the regional plan.
This is a regional plan.
Yeah.
And so I think the regional plan needs to have this kind of, where are we gonna put our affordable housing? Where are we gonna have places for people to work that means they're not polluting our
But they
world?
already have to do that. I was on the housing committee
Mhm.
where the towns had to show where they were gonna put their affordable housing.
But
It all is senior housing.
well, nonetheless, I do think that this is incumbent, on the
Yeah.
regional planning commissions that aren't doing this already, to do this in a thoughtful way, to figure out, well, where are our workers gonna live? Where are the people that, where is the affordable housing gonna be? Where are the places that we can have more of this so that there's less time in transportation? And they're using up less of their income on transportation and using up less of their income on housing by building housing they can afford in the areas that are heavily that need workers. I just think it's a part of the
But-
regional plan that should be there already.
Is it not, have we had testimony that it's not there?
I don't
I mean,
remember.
I don't wanna put Maura on the spot, but I
I
think
thought
she's trying to make it standardized, and one of the things I asked for was, they have this great information. And I've talked to a lot of planning commission folks who didn't know housingdata.org existed, who didn't know that they could go get help. So I think it's uneven around the regions. But again, this is we can take pieces out. We can make sure, Ellen, I want to give this just a few more minutes. If we could spend 20 minutes on Act 250, that would be good. But Ellen, is there anything else listening to the discussion you want to say about this? Because I know it has more language.
we can ask the who
Yeah.
speaks for the regional planners, Charlie?
Charlie Baker.
Yeah.
Charlie.
For
So,
Catherine.
why don't we just,
Yeah.
if we can
Yeah.
reach out to Charlie and
Sure.
just confirm that this is fine with them, I think.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that both of these sections are amending the existing housing elements that are required. So regional plans and municipal plans are already supposed to have a housing element in it. And so it's
Yeah.
adding additional specificity to both of those.
Numbers,
Yeah.
yeah. Scott, will you start a message to Charlie Baker
To weigh in on this
to weigh
section
in on pages 16?
or section 11.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're not done here, but we've flagged it.
Yeah, and I,
Circle the transportation. I think Maura's trying to be extremely helpful to we should start trying to collect data and encourage use of data that exists.
I think that's great. And I just want to put a plug in for transportation because that's always an issue. And part of the problem is we don't plan for housing and transportation at the same time. And they're not coordinated enough. And anything we can do to get them coordinated would be beneficial.
yeah, I agree.
Okay. You speak up.
Well,
Well, I'll speak
actually,
up for-
there are ways.
Well, that's what I'm getting. Adding, every time we add something, it lengthens the process.
I want to do
well,
it
this is
before the.
No,
plan.
I don't think, I don't agree. I think it just incorporates it into the work.
Somebody's
And the
got to do
criteria.
it. Somebody's got to have a meeting to do it. Somebody's got to get all the people involved to do it. And
Well,
that
our
takes
regional
time.
planning commissions, which.
They're already
kind of
doing
their job.
this.
And this is the planning, not the
Understand.
development, so.
We will revisit.
Okay. So we're on 17, section 12?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so section 12 has very similar to language to section 11, but this is for the municipal plan. It's a little bit less specific than the regional plan.
Even the short-term rental unit piece, that is, in my mind, I'm not speaking for Maura here, you know, they are gonna purchase this platinum version of AirDNA and help communities understand with short-term rental units, what's happening with them in their communities. This is really there are all the tools to help a community understand this, and many have just said, oh, I didn't know we had all this information. So it's not a, you know.
Oh, no, I think this
empirical
will be
study,
helpful.
but planning commissions have said, oh, I'm so glad to know this exists, but when they've heard about housing data.org and their DNA.
Yeah, no, I think this is all helpful. I think the more data, the better for everybody.
I think Waterbury, I talked to someone else than Katie on that commission, and they tried to use AirDNA on their own and just got the monthly data for like the region and not by zip code, and they didn't know that the state was gonna help, you know, with through the HFA pay for them. So it's like getting them data that they want anyway.
But every municipality, you know, and I hope most of them are addressing low and moderate income needs in their community. I mean, one assumes that a thoughtful planning commission is doing this work already, but it's good to have it articulate.
Yeah.
I think.
Energy codes, last big section for actually.
Right, and so this is a new concept. So this section 13, is amending the municipal authority to say that energy code, so a municipality has the ability currently to adopt energy codes. They're already given this specific authority to adopt the stretch code. So in energy codes, we have the RBs and the CBs, the residential building energy standards and the commercial building energy standards. They're for new construction and rehabilitation of older structures. And they are related to insulation and upgrades relating to energy efficiency. The stretch code is part of the RBs, which is a step higher to be even more energy efficient. So towns are already given the authority to adopt the stretch code, which is a stricter authority if they would like to do that. This language in section 13 is putting a sort of a cap on that authority and saying new energy codes adopted after July 1, 2023 shall not be more restrictive than the RBs or the stretch code if they want to adopt the stretch code, unless they've already been given the authority to do so in their municipal charter. And there are a couple of towns who have already done that. But it does have a carve out on page 19, which is that municipalities can be more stringent than the stretch codes for homes that are larger than 1,800 square feet per unit if the municipality receives approval from the Department of Public Service that the municipality followed the procedure in 30 BSA 51C1 and 2. So the Department of Public Service is the state agency that oversees the RBs. They do a lot of the energy work in the state. And so they adopt the RBs and the CBs using this procedure in 51C1 and 2, which does require an equity analysis to look at whether or not the cost to comply with the standard is not out of proportion to the benefits being achieved. So there's a process for looking at like some of the equity issues with adopting a high energy standard.
Ellen, do you go to natural resources at 9 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Maura, we're glad you're here. I think all these sections we could revisit at 9 a.m. really quickly, but we should keep Ellen, she just gave us a thumbs up. So well, we are on your schedule. So let's let Maura, we can ask questions of Maura at these sections. And we can go to the appropriation change.
So on page 19, the appropriation has been raised from $500,000 to $750,000, and there was a typo because I forgot the fiscal year. Oh, and also at the end of the sentence, it previously specified for municipalities to update their bylaws. And that's actually what the Municipal and Regional Planning Fund is for in general anyways. So there was a thought that that was just redundant
Mhm.
information because that's what it's already used for.
Right, and then that would take out the need for towns to feel like if we don't have bylaws, we're not eligible.
Right.
Okay,
So the appropriation,
that was my call because we had a request for another 500,000,
Yes.
recognizing that a lot will hinge on people's bylaws, and so.
so this this is going, because I thought we were originally looking at 1,500,000 to regional planning commissions and 500 to municipalities. or ACCD.
No, it was.
I need clarity.
Someone requests, so in the bill was 500 to update bylaws, same
Right.
fund. And then the rural caucus and others had said, can we do another 500 for new communities to do bylaws? And so we sort of met in the middle that you can do whatever you want with the 750,000 update or create new bylaws through this.
Got it. So this is the umbrella for all bylaws.
Yeah, and
Okay.
with the appropriations, as you know, folks know, but maybe Senator Harrison's new to this, this is an ongoing conversation with the appropriations committee. You know, money we put in isn't, it's a policy suggestion to the appropriations.
She will take all the money out, stick it on the wall, and in the end, she'll divide it up.
Right.
Right, and this is an existing fund that gets an appropriation every year from the
Right.
property transfer tax. So, yes.
And that the towns apply to. and
To get- yes.
Some of them get funded, but not all. Do we know how many would be funded with this amount?
Well, they've used up, and when we've been putting in additional for the modernization of the bylaws, I'm pretty sure it has been used up completely.
We had
Am I
some
wrong on
testimony
that?
from DHCD, but we can
Yeah.
confirm that.
Oh,
You'd have to check in with DHCD. Again, Chad Simmons, Vermont Housing Finance Agency, you'd have to check in with DHCD.
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that, but I do believe it.
So we can check on the number outside.
Is Montpelier's finest going in. I'm
Okay.
sorry, old
Okay.
mayors follow their
all mayors follow stretchers. Is that what we're?
fire trucks, ambulances, anything that their municipal services are provided.
Okay.
No,
Something's
it's
going on.
always disturbing to see a stretcher coming into the state house.
Okay.
It's not great, I'm sure.
Well, everyone's okay.
They might not be, well,
Okay.
there are people, because there are colleagues.
So then, okay, I mean, I'm concerned
Yeah.
for whoever that is, but.
Yeah.
Can't
No,
do
no.
anything right now.
There's a
Right.
very small change in section 15, but I think we already talked about it. It previously said work with underserved communities, I believe. And so this is just specifying that these housing navigators will work with communities in general.
Yeah, great.
So
So no quirks.
the only thing I would add here is to add the word regional, local and regional housing organizations. And private,
Okay.
and on line 17, I know it's square, but I would just add it because we have many of our strongest housing, we have delegated a huge amount of authority to our home ownership center partners, which there are 5, and they're regional.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think everyone's okay with
And
that.
they've already been sent the money from ACCD, so, I mean, that's who DHCD is partnering with,
Oh, okay, not in the new appropriation we're talking about, but yeah.
so it just
Okay.
builds on.
We are at Act 250.
Okay.
So the only question I have is, how did we arrive at the 300,000 for that?
Catherine Dimitrick did say
Okay.
that she was part of the group and thought this is 3 positions. We'll distribute them into 3 regions of the state. We can revisit that with her outside of committee, but she did confirm that this section works for them. And it might be that we increase it in the future when we see this is really working, but we probably don't want to go wild now and
Okay, and they'll be embedded, those 3 regional
with
people
BAFTA.
with BAFTA, which doesn't have all, okay.
She did come in and say.
Yeah, no, I remember.
And they would be embedded probably elsewhere.
In the
working
regional
with
planning
BAFTA.
commissions is my guess. Because
Or the trusts.
Or in a
So
big
that's-
town?
Yeah,
that's,
right, they'll live somewhere
Yeah.
and they'll be contracted to.
yeah, that's why I added the regional piece, because those
We're
are,
at Act 250, aren't you?
I am, and so,
Act 250. So
may I just say, as we start this, This is, I think, the section of the bill that is our biggest, in some ways, our biggest challenge. I think the zoning by right is a big challenge also. But I think our Act 250 is also, and I am not an Act 250 expert. I wish I was, but I need to better understand the implications of the choices we're making. So, I mean, so that in layperson terms, I understand that in theory, we of course want more housing. That is not the issue.
So
But the implications to what this does.
I really appreciate that. Ellen only has 10 minutes with us now, so we.
You can't do that, 10 minutes?
I know.
I mean, I might be able to.
You want
I-
speedy?
If people are really sitting on confounding questions, we probably have to, I don't know, Ellen, there might be someone else who can help with Act 250 in Lynch Council who's not as busy as you are. I don't know, like Michael Grady or something. Hello, Mayor. But we'll have to answer those questions somewhat outside this room, but I hear you. This,
That's
you know,
important, it's an
it
important
is an
question.
important.
Yes.
question.
I agree.
I'm sorry, can I just
Just to get creative.
interrupt for a moment?
Yeah.
Hey, Scott. Remember when I emailed you the Act 250 chart? It was on, so on Tuesday, I did prepare an Act 250 chart for the prior version, which is 6.1. It does encompass most of what's in here. There are a couple of things. So
Right.
that can help just be a slight visual too for advice when I'm not here.
Yeah.
And I can potentially update it, but yeah, there are a few different pieces here.
And we
Yes.
can maybe, you know, I think Jake Hemrick, I think there's a few other, like our education finance experts, there's a few people who float around state government who have Act 250 expertise, that if it's not Ellen, because we're sharing her natural resources, somebody else.
It's hard to share you.
It's hard. I think it's hard for Ellen. Well, that's important.
And that's
Well,
just.
and
the
I'm
sound.
always happy to talk about Act 250, so we can start. So
Yes.
on page 20, section 16 has the Act 250 changes in it. So section 16 is 10 VSA 6001, which is the definition section of Act 250. And the first language is in the definition of development. The definition of development in Act 250 sets the jurisdictional triggers for Act 250. So it's one of the primary definitions you look at. So the first change is that currently under Act 250, the construction of housing units, no matter what form they take, 10 or more units triggers the need for an Act 250 permit. This language is raising that to 25 units or more requires an Act 250 permit.
Okay, we might want, given the required density, what once was 10 1-acre homes is now 50 1-acre home, 50. We're requiring you let 55 units on every one of those acres, so we might want to make sure that
This aligns.
that the numbers align.
Thank you.
Does
I don't think I understand that question. That the 25 aligns with.
Right now, we are on 10 acre, you can put 10 acres on one unit or 10 units. They can be on a quarter acre, they can be on an acre. But we're now saying for every one of, if those are 1-acre units, and many of them are, we're now requiring that you put 5 units on where you used to be able to put 1 unit. I just want to make sure that our numbers align.
But 5 acres with water and sewer. You can't do 5 acres. This could be
5 per
anywhere.
acre with water pursuit. But I
Yeah,
just
this
want to
is
make
not-
sure
right.
that the numbers.
And I
work.
just want to say for the record, but we will make sure we discuss this further. We're not requiring 5 units per acre. We're just saying someone could build up to 5 units per acre.
But we're saying they shall allow.
They
it.
have the capacity, yes. And but not everywhere, just on municipal water and sewer. And this is more of a within 5 miles in 5 years. And kind of anywhere. This is an anywhere provision.
Right.
Which
This is anywhere, and also, I think I see where you're going, Senator Cummings, in that this is, in under Act 250, there's a parcel size jurisdictional trigger, which is the 10-acre size.
Okay, yeah.
This is separate, so it really is just counting the number of units. And
Okay.
so, I think, God, I see what you were saying, like, if the jurisdictional trigger is 10 acres currently, that acre is probably gonna hold more
A
units.
lot more units.
But this is just talking about the number of units constructed,
Okay,
not the size.
And this piece maintains the 5x5
Yes.
because it's anywhere, and then we have another section that's takes out the 5x5, but only in growth areas.
So, but
Yes.
if I may
Yeah.
ask, so, but to go to Ann's concern, does this mean that you could have 25, does this add to sprawl by being able to allow 25 1-acre developments in?
No,
I mean, if you had 25 acres, you could have 1-acre housing in each.
it's,
So is that your question?
I just want to make sure that the numbers are aligned, that
Yeah.
where used to be 10 units, and
Yes.
most of those were individual home units on any, most of our more rural areas, it's 1-acre development. We're now, because we're increasing the density,
Right.
where you used to put 10 units,
Mhm.
you now could put, if these were 1-acre units, you can now put 50 units.
Mhm. If it's municipal water and
If it's
sewer.
on municipal water
And
and sewer.
I just want to remind us, the 5x5, people came in who are small developers to testify that they might want to add to a project that they already did.
Yeah,
at
no,
9.
that's fine.
then they
I
have
just
to go
want to
5
make
miles away.
sure
Yeah,
that
right.
in raising this to 25, if we're raising the density
Yes.
to a potential 50, that we are in fact making progress.
That might be more relevant in the next section about
Okay.
growth centers.
Okay, so,
But if we have more questions that take us away from our chat with Alan,
Okay,
I just want, like, we can flag that. No, I'm,
but I guess in this section,
Yeah.
what guarantees that they'll be densely built and not a bunch of sprawl?
right, but
Well,
if
they're
we're,
within 5
if we are trying to do denser development,
That's our
All right.
objective. but-
okay, that's our objective. If the 8 units triggered it, and we're now saying if there's water and sewer on that same area, you can put 50 units if you're on water and sewer, then the 25 still puts that under Act 250 review.
yes.
right.
And is that what we want?
Right, exactly. And Allison, we can continue to answer that question offline.
Yeah, no, I think I just
But
need
we
that
have-
help.
Yeah, a lot of people
Decided
said, now I have to go 5 miles away and do,
Yes.
you know.
Well,
and
no,
so
I
yeah.
get that issue, but I guess okay,
Yeah,
we can
yeah.
do this offline. I just need to
It would
understand.
be nice to try and get
And to
through.
go to your
Not
concern.
off-
So
We're
I'll have
gonna
another
so
question
close.
about
We
that
are
later.
going to,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
are not
we're really
discussing
close.
policy off
I
TV.
mean,
Well,
But we
one-on-one.
should let you explain it maybe.
well, right, I mean, I think the other
Go
purpose, like, I think you can read the words yourself, but I do think I am partially here to answer some of the legal questions.
Exactly.
So I
Yes,
will just
yeah.
say,
That's
so
fair.
Act 250, this language isn't phrased specifically tied to density. That's not really what it's doing. However, Act 250 generally has multiple density related provisions in criterion 9. So like criterion 9L, there's specific provisions in an Act 250 permit that you need to demonstrate that you are not contributing to sprawl. It's the scattered development criteria. So things that go through Act 250 have to demonstrate that they're not contributing to sprawl. So criterion 9H is scattered development, and then criterion 9L is settlement patterns, promoting the town's historic settlement pattern. So while it's not specific that the units have to be close together, there's other provisions of Act 250 that.
Thank
are
you,
part
and
of the look at it.
that's the kind of
yeah,
thing,
that's unique.
I think we need
Yeah.
to understand the implications of this and what it really means on the ground.
That's fair.
So the rest of the language at the bottom of page 20 is doing something related but different in that it's removing the unit cap on the number of priority housing units that are exempt from Act 250. Priority housing projects are affordable housing. They're mixed income or mixed use that are 20% of the units are affordable for at least 15 years. And so those projects that meet that are exempt from Act 250, and currently under the statute, there is a number of units that are exempt from Act 250. And this is removing that cap so that any number of these affordable units will be exempt from Act 250.
In
It's
any.
not highlighted because it was in our last draft.
And it is also tied specifically to the designated centers. They have, those have to be located in a designated center.
Right. Well, maybe that,
I would love for us to get to these two options on the commercial side. And then we can actually have Maura help us a little bit with the number of residential dwelling units piece in the grand list. So if we get through the next couple pages,
Do you want me to skip to the?
Skip ahead.
yeah, can you touch on these and maybe people can just know as quickly as possible?
Sure, so the language on page 21 is removing the so-called 5-year 5-mile rule, which is saying that in a designated area, so a downtown or village center or neighborhood development area, a housing project with 25 or more units triggers Act 250, but there's no 5-year 5-mile rule. And so this language is intended so that of a one-off 25 unit project will be separated from the next 24 unit project or the next small project, so that they won't be counted together by the same developer.
so within 2 years, if somebody was doing something in a designated town or village center that was only 3 miles from another one, that they could do both of those developments. So that is, yeah.
Yes, I did want to just sort of flag, you haven't talked about this language at all. I think you may have heard testimony from someone that it isn't clear if there's any time limit. You may want to consider like a bright line of like 2 months or
Like a
1 month.
separation
Yeah,
timeline.
just because otherwise it might, and it could be a nominal time if you're looking for that kind of thing, but right now there isn't a bright line, and so it's a little unclear, but yes.
So to that point, if I may, if a developer has a capacity to be able to do 2 projects at the same time, both of which are dense, designated downtowns that would be appropriate, that are reasonably close together, is there a reason? I mean, I need to understand why the timeline is important, because if it's a good sized developer and these are both the appropriate expansion, appropriate size developments, is there a reason that they couldn't do 2 within a year or 2 of each other?
So
Help me understand.
So one of the reasons that I have heard previously is that you can end up creating sort of a legal fiction with a developer just giving different projects different names to avoid going through Act 250 entirely. Like each building has a different name, and so it never reaches the cap. But that
mean
is
It's Sundance Meadow and it's Meadow
In a
Lake.
different LLC, yeah.
You mean the different names of the developer?
Right, and so that's a policy decision. So that was a stated concern in the past, that if you didn't have some kind of bright line distinguisher, that there would be cumulative impacts that would be impacting the
Right.
town or the water system, but they would not escape partial review.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good flag.
All right, I'm just having a hard time seeing it. If the same developer does multiple versus different developers doing the exact same thing, what's the difference? But that's probably philosophical.
Well, I think that's something we should check.
Yeah,
And talk to the
Well,
developer.
a developer could create an LLC for each development, and therefore it's a separate entity.
Well, so right now,
Well-
under Act 250, though, that is an element, is distinguishing who the owner is and if there is an arm's length transaction actually occurring.
Right. So to make sure that we still
Are captured.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. We're on borrowed time and we don't have bother too much, but
Yeah.
let's see how we can do on these last pieces.
Yeah, line 14 just again
Okay.
strikes the cap on priority housing projects, and then subdivision 19, the definition of subdivision is related to what we were just talking about. A number of subdividing lots can trigger Act 250. currently it's 10 lots in a 10-acre town or 6 lots in a town without zoning. This is raising it to 15 or more lots in the designated center.
So currently it's what?
Do you
10
really think there's a designated center with 15 open lots in it?
No, but that's okay.
Well, if you're subdividing,
No, I mean,
Oh, you're
the designated areas are generally drawn really closely.
Tight. Mine is
Tight.
very,
And so you're not,
I think the neighborhood development areas are a little looser.
yeah, but what do we have, 3 of those?
no, we have
Yeah,
12 now or
12
13.
now? Okay.
But we can put a question mark, but that might,
Yeah.
you're right, it could be unhelpful to us. But let's go to this last piece, because this is a discussion we've had and
We gotta go. Do you want me to talk about the conversion piece or no?
yeah, sorry, I thought that was the last piece.
Yeah. Oh, you're also amending the definition of priority housing project to include village centers that have permanent zoning. They're not currently in that definition.
Oh, okay, so that's a high, sorry, was just, is that
So-
a new?
It's not new, it's new
Okay.
from the prior, two drafts ago, I think it's from.
Okay, okay.
But eliminating the caps is a big deal.
That is the biggest deal.
And we raised
Back
them.
250.
Yeah, and we raised them last year, as you recall.
Right,
So in response to.
Yes.
right.
It was the raise.
A number of towns, but
And you know
especially.
what? That might be where we land, because this has many places to go, but
Yeah,
the question is where we as the housing committee want to land before it goes to other places.
right. But
So,
Hey Scott, will you send my apologies to Jude really quickly?
thank you.
So on page 22, there is new language that we haven't talked about at all, but I think you may have talked about in here at some point. I heard that there was a discussion. So currently under Act 250, if there's already a permit on the property, the permit lasts in perpetuity. If the project if the use of the property changes at any point, it is possible that a permit amendment would be needed, even if it's converting to housing, which may not trigger Act 250, but by virtue of having the permit, you always need a amendment. So the two options for how to avoid that amendment, I have drafted 2 options. So the first is is section 17A. So no permit amendment is required for the construction of 24 housing units. So that means the permit will stay on the property, but no amendment would be needed. They could use the building for housing. But at some point in the future, if they go back to commercial, the permit will still be on the property and they'll need an amendment. The second option, 17B, would extinguish the permit if the property was converted to a use that wouldn't trigger Act 250, like 24 units of housing. And I hope I raised it to 24, but I'm actually not sure. But
you did on page.
the intent was to extinguish the permit entirely so that there was no permit on the site. And so,
So no permit on the site. I need to understand.
And that's only commercial going to residential.
well, no, I mean,
Okay.
it's,
Sorry. I thought
it
that's
is,
what-
so, well, in Act 250, it's commercial, industrial, residential. So like, it could also be industrial. I wasn't entirely, I'm gonna be honest, I can't
Mhm.
remember what I wrote in page 23, and
Okay.
I can't remember if I specified going entirely to residential.
Okay.
Oh, I did, it's on line 11.
Oh, and
So
it says 20.
it's 20.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So,
Okay.
yes, so going
Mhm.
from jurisdictional use to 20 units of housing would extinguish the permit.
Is there anything you want to say about the difference between these 2 options, and then we can sit with that ourselves, like?
So currently, 81, the first section 17A is a significant change, but a minorly significant change because there's lots of exemptions in Act 250 that don't require permit amendments. Going to extinguishing a permit is a pretty big
Yeah.
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah.
that,
And that's the one on 23C.
yeah.
Is that C?
Yeah. I'm inclined toward the first one. So this, but they still have, they don't need a permit amendment, but they fall under an Act 250 permit.
Right, and so then if in the future they did something else besides housing,
Mhm.
they would then need to go back to Act 250.
So we might need to let Ellen go.
Yeah, I think you need to go. I just have a question on that in terms of what the standard difference is if you go from commercial to residential in terms of cleanup, if there's, you know, if there's stuff that has to be healthier and better if you're gonna have residences, people
Right,
there 24 hours a day.
right.
I don't know what the difference.
And other permits that might be a bit like water,
Yeah,
stormwater especially.
Stormwater is,
But thank you. This
Yeah,
is,
thank you so much, Ellen. Extend our apologies.
Yes.
Not your apologies.
Yeah.
Okay, David, you've been so patient. Maura, do people have, there's one more change that is not David's change on page 25 that asks for grand list data to include the number of residential dwelling units. So I would just want to see if people have questions on that.
well, I have,
And the other data pieces of the things that flagged.
we have
up
some
for us.
suggestions on that, actually.
Okay, and we did hear more of that, including the number of residential dwelling units. Some attorney, maybe in Ledge Council, does think that that could be major, so. We haven't had a chance to hear from Ellen exactly what that looks like. Yes.
you just totally lost.
Oh, there's one more. So Maura helped with a few different data changes and the energy code piece.
Okay,
And there was one more change before David's section
page
that,
25.
yeah, that Ellen didn't get to talk about, even though it's her jurisdiction, because this was a kind of attempt to say, can we start getting the grand list to tell us new housing units that are developed? And this looks really simple, but apparently it's not obvious. It's just most things are not. So kind of-
So I did notice that
Yeah.
Mistress Collins arrived just after our earlier conversation that were the new section. So maybe before we keep going, we could go back
That's
to where we
exactly-
were
Yeah.
and clarify those pieces and why those pieces are important to include or underscore. It's really kind of probably underscoring in our regional planning work.
Right, so what we're talking about is Maura helped with regional plan, municipal plan, energy code, and the small grant list change. And, you know, it was gracious of her because these were just things we've been talking about that haven't appeared anywhere yet. And we can ask questions of Maura or just let her react
Yeah.
to whatever she heard of the discussion.
So we're going back to page 16,
Mhm.
section 11, is what my understanding.
That would be the first place we could look at. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Maura Collins. I'm with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. I appreciate the comments that I helped with this, but honestly, starting on page 16, these sections were proposed. I heard about them through Charlie Baker, the Chittenden County RPC, and I believe he's worked with the other RPCs, VAPTA, on this language.
And just a reminder.
In sharing the language with me, the idea, this gets to the idea of setting some targets or ranges for communities. We know early in the session, you all heard VHFA's estimates that we need between 30 and 40,000 more units by 2030. And so, you know, how does a community know what its share is? And so this language largely came from VAPTA. I did insert a few words to it. So in fairness to my colleagues at VAPTA, I was reading it as if I were not from Chittenden County, but instead were from a rural, small, maybe not growing community, and thinking about the housing needs of reinvestment, looking at housing quality, because we lose part of that 40,000 unit number. As you remember, there were 4 components of it. And one of the components was the housing destruction rate, not construction, but we lose homes every year to poor quality. They come off the market. They don't meet codes. This is why you created the VHIP program. And so some tweaks are that, you know, it mentions at the bottom of page 16 on line 18, it says that the housing will result in a supply of building code and energy code compliant homes, you know, trying to reinforce the quality issues there. I believe, I think it was Senator Brock may have had a question about where the 30% of income on housing is a standard we've long heard of. Where did this 15% on transportation come from? I'm a houser, so I always talk about the 30% number, but my peers in the transportation world do use that as an academic standard to try to set affordability together. The idea is that a household should pay no more than 45% of their income on housing and transportation. The two are so linked because you can often find cheaper housing if you're willing to drive farther. And you all know the impact on roads and bridges, as well as the environment and our sanity of losing time out with our families. So, so the 15% with the 30% goes to that 45% standard. And there are maps and websites and research that that look at Vermont, and I could show it to you right now if you want to see it, but it's called the Housing and Transportation Map. And you can look at every part of Vermont and see how much of Vermont is the households are under this 45% standard and how many are over at large in a community. So the rest of that language in that section is just having the RPCs set some of these targets and what information they should look at when setting those. And then the next section 12 on the next page is how the municipality then should use their housing element to look at the actions they propose taking to address the needs that have come up. There has been a lot of discussion by your committee about the impact of short-term rentals. You've heard me testify that the impact of short-term rentals is very acute in certain communities, and frankly, it's not as acute in other communities. And so the last line of section 12 says, as well as any material impact of short-term rentals. So that if you're one of those communities where it's showing up in your data that you have a lot of these and it's impacting your housing market, then a municipality should, in their housing element, address this in some way. And I'm not going to prescribe what that looks like. I think that's best done by the municipality.
Thanks. That's clarifying and I think helpful and I think all good. I think those are good changes.
Does anyone have any questions for Maura on those?
No.
And Maura was in on the energy code piece and shared that language, but do people have questions on the energy code piece while we have Maura?
Can I just ask something on the
Oh,
previous
sure,
one about, I'm glad that you included transportation more, thank you. And I think it's important that regional commissions and towns think about that.
Yeah.
And I see a lack of coordination between housing development and transportation facilities.
Yes.
And I think those need to be tightened up. And I'm not sure if language in the municipal planning would lead to that increased coordination, but I'm not sure where to put it, but I just want to name that as something that
But the regional plan does, so that's helpful. I mean,
Yes.
one assumes because,
but it's not,
yeah.
in Act 250, actually, V-Trans does look at
Transportation
existing public transportation, but a fair amount of municipalities don't, in my opinion.
Well, they're more siloed in their vision.
Right.
So if you wanted to think about that more outside of committee, would that more be the regional planning
I
commission?
think you're passing judgment
So
on
we
people
can-
without enough information.
We can touch base with Charlie and see,
And get some suggestions of
Yeah.
where that could be.
right,
And
And
it
the
may
R-
just,
yeah.
it may not need to be statute, it may just be making information available.
right. More.
The RPCs may have further ideas. I just want to say that theoretically, the language you have now should work in that regard, because if you think about it, an RPC may notice that a community has affordable housing and then the transportation is the unaffordable piece, or vice versa. And so by naming that and calling it out by municipality, then the municipal plan says that they have to use the RPC's targets and discussion and needs assessment. The municipality is directed to list the public and private actions that they will use to address the needs identified by the RPC's work. And so in some ways, I do think that this starts to bridge those silos. I hear you very clearly. This happens, you could say that our energy policy is siloed from our housing policy and economic development as well. And so I'm not saying this is going to fix it, but I do think it's heading in the right direction in this regard.
Great, thank you. That's helpful.
I just want to say, I think one example of a municipality taking into regional consideration with transportation is Montpelier's new transit hub right behind the Capitol Plaza. And clearly there's a municipality that has thought regionally about transportation in some way in what.
Oh, that's been under
No, I know, but I'm just saying.
concept for 30 years.
I
Right
know, and I'm just
now,
saying I'm doing a shout out. to
yeah,
that.
but it's just a place where other places can stop in Montpelier and you can get shelter while you wait for the buses that were there before.
Right, right.
It didn't add any transportation.
No.
It just has
Sorry, I was
a
just
hub.
trying to.
We love Montpelier. Can we go to page 25 and Maura, hear your thoughts on the inclusion of number of residential dwelling units before we hear, I think, what will be concerns from somewhere in Ledge Council, that's a challenge. So,
Parking underneath.
We tried that.
oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I always want to defer to the lawyers. So please listen to those concerns. I will tell you what the intention was of this edit, and then you all can figure out if it's possible to do legally.
Great, we're on page 25, the one highlighted change.
Yep, section 20 on page 25 is about the grand list. I have a copy of a couple communities' grand list pulled up on my other screen here. And they're in, just to give you an idea of what you are looking for data. And so as a research person, the information is available in Excel, and that is handy, and we can start to draw conclusions. There are, gosh, I don't know how many columns here, but of information, it goes to letters AS. So that's clearly, 40, 50 columns of information. Most of them are text fields, so you can't do any kind of analysis on them, and they are not uniformly completed. There are numerical fields around the acres, span number, the value. And so when you have a numerical field in Excel, I know this is boring, but you can start to, add up how many acres are included in this grand list. What is the total value of all the properties in this community? But when it comes to the number of residential units in the grand list, that is a text field that is not completed in the same way town by town. And even within a town, it's not completed similarly. And like, for instance, I'm looking at the town of Colchester, and it says in a lot of this, it says various numbers of units. And in other places, it has numbers. I was looking at the town of Heinsberg, and it repeated how many acres, and then it said how many dwelling units. But it's in a text field. And the intention of the edit was to have a field in the database that was numerical, that literally we could sum up at the bottom and say there are this many residential dwelling units in this community. We could look at that by county, by statewide, and it would give us a starting point, so that, going back to the page 16 edits we were just talking about, so that the RPCs and the municipalities knew their starting point if they wanted to then measure progress over time. And that may be measuring progress, that how many units are they losing? Again, that destruction issue, like we feel like units are coming offline. Are they? Well, we need this information to quantify that. Or how many units are we adding if this were a growing community? So that's the intention behind it, but I don't work with the database itself. I don't know if there's legal issues, so I do welcome other testimony on this.
It is a good intention, I think. Yes.
I think it's a great intention, and I'm just forgetting what section our data collection work is in how it works with this. Is this the only place we're doing the data collection piece?
This and those plans are the data collection pieces now.
Senator Clarkson, I'll remind There are some
Yeah,
other
no, 'cause
ideas you've
I
been
was just gonna
floating.
raise the landlord certificate question, and I just don't know where to raise it,
Right.
here or in the other data collection pieces,
Yeah.
because I think Amora has, VHFA has identified that we don't need to reinvent the wheel on some of this data collection, that it exists in the landlord certificates. There's a huge amount of data in the landlord certificates, and the challenge is getting compliance on that. And the question is, how do we, if we don't want to reinvent the wheel on this and actually collect the data that's supposed to be being collected at the moment, how do we encourage not only landlords to comply in a productive way, how can we create some carrots that make them,
Yeah.
to make them actually fill out? Because I don't know what percent of landlords fill it out, but not 100%. And then the second question is, how do we get tax to share that data that we're already collecting with us or with whoever, to make a data informed decisions? So it's been brought to our attention that a lot of this data collection opportunity exists in the landlord certificate. How do we make that certificate have more people comply, and how do we get tax to productively share that information with us? Is that a fair way of sharing that?
I'm gonna let Maura answer in whatever way she sees fit, with an eye toward taking this discussion to tax, and we can't really resolve this, and we've already eaten into David's time, so this might have to be something that comes back as a proposal, but
It could be a proposal, I think, without too much difficulty.
okay, I don't know if that's true, and we don't
I
want
don't
it
know.
to send the bill to finance also. So.
Obviously can't answer for tax, but I will say from a data housing perspective, I think Senator
Yeah.
Clarkson listed some opportunities that are worthy of exploring.
And maybe it's a study, or, if you want to take it offline and workshop it with, I do
We
think,
can develop language on this and have it back to you in the next day.
okay, great. And it would be ideal if I'm looking at Senator Cummings, but I don't know if that alone would send this bill to finance.
I don't either.
Okay,
I wouldn't think so.
okay.
Just asking for information.
On the landlord.
No, it's asking landlords to actually comply with
Which is
what's
a
required.
Be careful.
Yeah. Senator Clarkson, be careful.
No, I mean, when you
if
start
I-
talking about requiring private
Oh,
individuals
in general, be
to
careful.
comply,
Right,
there's a certain number of them
Yeah.
that
and
might
I think,
react in a way you don't want. them to.
yes, and Maura's talked about it as a carrot, not as like.
Yes,
just like,
I
we
think
have some
carrots
bright
are
carrots.
always
Yeah.
We have carriage, but this is already required of them. We're not requiring this. This is already required for them
Yeah.
to fill out.
Maura,
But they are.
A first step could always be to ask the tax department to currently report on the filings that they have without making any changes. That would be probably the smallest step that you could consider, which would be to have them report on this. I know I have ideas when I look at the form about how I would cut the data if I had access to it, which I'm not asking for, but I'm just saying, so maybe a request for the tax department to do a report in partnership with like some other housing organizations, a landlord organization, Vermont Tenants. If there was a little steering committee of 4 of us who could help work with the tax department in support about what kind of information, because I do think that I have a reasonable understanding of the information you're looking for. And so we could work together on their doing a report that is, I want to be very clear, disaggregated and anonymous, and just saying like, in these towns, there are this many filings that have happened. These are how many units are covered. These are the values of those properties. This is how much they're renting for, things like that you can get from the form that's already required and that the tax department is already collecting.
I'm gonna go ahead and say, and I tried to tell this to other stakeholders too, this bill isn't done after it leaves our committee. I think the House would be amenable to this kind of language, whether it comes in the form of a study or the group can gel in the next couple weeks and figure this out, and we could reintroduce the language at some other stage of the bill's journey. I don't want to rush you and say, get it back to us tomorrow, but that would be what would have to happen because of the holiday on Monday. So I would just say, if you want to just take the time to get that section right, my guess is, since the House is doing a lot of landlord tenant related work that they want to discuss related to this bill, it could be, it could include the House, and you could continue that conversation. Does that make sense?
So we'll figure it out.
Yeah. So it's either tomorrow or some other committee.
And just from
Or
a
when
drafting
it's
point of view,
Yeah.
David is data? Or is Ellen data collection?
If you're talking about Title 32, the tax department, then that's Abby.
Fine, okay, yeah, so that's why it would be too much, I think.
Thank you.
Committee the next day.
To be reminded of these things.
It's hard to keep up with 20 different layers.
Yes, well,
We try our hardest.
I know who does taxes.
any other final
Yes, no, I
questions?
know.
Yeah, right. Any
But
other final questions for Maura?
Data.
Maura, thank you. You always pinch hit and just come in when we need you. We really appreciate it. Thanks, Chad, for the communication on that regard. And thank you, David, for your patience. We're like in the end game here. So
I'm not in any hurry whatsoever, seriously.
you look unhurried, and I appreciate that.
I just want to make sure that I do have a chance to
Yes.
communicate what
Yes.
I heard
Oh.
last night.
Mhm. I thank you for reminding me.
We're on who?
Okay. So,
Okay,
yes.
I want,
Senator Cummings is reporting back from.
I am, and I promised them, I told them I couldn't promise them some of the changes they wanted. I told them I thought we could get some flexibility in the parking requirements and in the, if there's a sewer, you will allow 5 units an acre through their farmland. But what I heard last night is that, I think we have to remember, these are all volunteers. They come down at least every other week. They spend an evening. As far as I know, there's no formal training. They are community members trying to do the best thing for their community. And we
And
have
they is the planning commission?
the planning commission,
Okay.
and we may have some planning now, but in my day, there was nothing. You just
And it's,
were there.
you were with Barry? I can't-
Very town,
Okay, Barry.
All
Yes,
right.
a lot is asked of them.
I
which
just want to
has
clarify. who we're
like
talking.
4 or 5 different developed what we would call village sections. And then, which tend to be down in the valley on the main route, and then there are the hills in between. And there's some sections up there that they have identified as where things happen. I haven't found out if any of these have been formally designated, but I have several towns like that. I think what they were really, the language of the bill, you shall, and you will, and you must, to them was very punitive. And I think what I heard was that they were really feeling that we had tried them in absentia and found them guilty of preventing housing in the state. And they don't think they've done that. And they pointed to the next town over that has no zoning and has no significant amount of housing. And so if then, okay, and I got asked this yesterday about if other states are having housing issues and they don't have, how can you say Act 250s to blame? Well, they're saying the town next door doesn't have a whole lot of housing. And I think we just need to be careful about our language. I told them I have been on a planning commission where we asked the developer to hire a landscape architect who could represent us to critique their landscape architect's design. All right, added a little bit to the cost. The other thing I heard, that I think we should look at, because we have not, is when you say you have to allow 5 dwellings per acre, you greatly increase the impervious surface on that acre, which greatly increases the expense. We have, I don't know what the 3 acre, I happily sent that to Senator Watson, but there is some real, and
The
when
impervious
you're-
surfaces. you mean?
yes,
Yeah.
and when they're planning for what they would now plan as a 4-unit development, they are going to have to plan as a 20-unit development. And all of this, plus I guess the town is, because the developers are developed and gone, something we did, the town now is faced with $800,000 to plan how they're going to do stormwater for these pre-existing developments. And then the town must find a way, one is their industrial park, to go make these private landowners now participate in. So there's more things than we've heard going on.
They're dealing with retroactive issues.
They
and
are
they're
dealing,
doing it.
yes, and
Yeah.
that, I mean, yes, I know you do have to have an archaeologist look at your site but the stormwater and impervious surface,
The
all-
implications are big.
the implications are big and they're expensive. And yet we are holding them accountable for not developing housing that only costs 30% of someone's income.
Right.
And oh, by the way, they don't, other than the industrial park, they don't have an employer. And it is pretty tightly, the schools across the street, there's mobile homes across the street, and the town hall. It's pretty tightly developed up there, unless you want to do the cemetery.
Well, that may be tightly developed.
But then it drops straight down.
Right.
It's got height
It's got
and
height.
depth.
So, first of all, thank you for, reaching out to, or having an exchange with one of your communities, because we want to, this affects everyone.
Yeah.
We are taking flexibility away from communities. We have to recognize that. And we need to hear from them about what it feels like on the ground. I'm going straight to a practical place of, should we get A&R in for a half an hour and see if
I
they're
think we
available
need to
tomorrow?
have A&R in.
Okay, I don't wanna like skip over the acknowledgement that, a lot of commissions are struggling to fill seats because this is a complex job. If the
It's a
planner,
thankless job.
thankless and complex, if the planner was there last night and heard anything for pages 4 and 5 where they wanted to
Their
talk about the corridor
town
issue.
planner that has been their town planner for many years
Yeah,
is now the assistant town manager and is, as he said, transitioning into being
Okay.
the town manager. I assume they are in the process of hiring,
yeah,
but it's not Violette, it's Violet,
oh, yes,
would be someone that
okay,
has been there a long
yeah.
time.
Could we start an exchange? Did he hear anything where he thought he could work with us on the language?
I don't think so. I think it's
okay.
more the tone.
Yeah, okay,
It's not the individual language.
right,
It's like they are being
right,
found guilty
right,
of, because there's no housing.
yes,
And we are telling them, this is how you will deal with it, and not understanding. There are also impact fees and
Mhm.
traffic. If you put 5 houses an acre out that stretch,
Mhm.
they are going down this very steep hill into downtown Barry.
Mhm.
They are V-Trans impact fees. There are, you start greatly increasing your population and increasing it in density. You
Mhm.
have ramifications on your police department. You have
Yeah.
there's all kinds of other considerations
Right,
that we need to be aware of.
Right.
And I think they feel like they're left holding the bag.
right,
with
Yeah.
dealing with this.
And
I
now,
know only one person there did not have a full head of gray hair. I have known two of these gentlemen, and I believe for 40 years. I believe they're both older than I am.
Mhm.
There are no new young,
I see what you're
it is
saying.
not a
Yeah.
young board. These
Yeah.
are the old generation that volunteer.
Right, right,
We're not,
right.
yeah, it's, you,
Is that the-
you're not getting people.
Mhm.
Is that the same for Berry City, the planning commission of Berry City?
I have no idea, but I wouldn't be
Because our planning
surprised.
commission in Woodstock has a surprising number of younger
Yeah, but
people.
you're Woodstock.
Which are, no, I'm
Woodstock and
surprised.
Shelburne, it's not small
No,
town.
no, I get it. I'm
There's
just
our line.
saying, I'm impressed by actually, because it's been an issue, as you know, for getting people.
And not to overlink the two, but, you know, I remember being in downtown Berry City when, you know, their economic development person said, we have 300 job openings and 3 housing listings, you
Right.
know, and not having
No
people
one's- no
to
one's
turn
arguing
is
that.
is the
No
challenge.
one is arguing.
Right, yeah.
But Barry City will also,
Mhm.
because I've been put on stage and beaten up along with my former seatmate, the governor.
Did you go alone last night?
I went, Ann Watson zoomed
Ann?
in, but
Oh,
I was
nice.
on the
Okay.
hot seat for 2 hours.
Yeah, wow.
That because we put the courthouse there. Barry City deals with a lot more crime
Mhm.
than and we heard that about Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
We have, you know, Springfield is in the news with some regularity with
Mhm.
drug raids, and you've clustered a lot of people in small downtown areas
Mhm.
without, there was a group in Barry of older women who went downtown and walked the street on Friday night and visited shops, just because that's what they used to do. But
Mhm.
they don't do it anymore because the whole character of downtown has changed.
Yeah.
It has changed in the last 30 years. And so if that's an issue, that's what people that moved up the hill moved to get away from. And so we need to make sure you get the balance of young families that will vote for the school budget, that will see a future in that community. But we're not going to do it by focusing more dense development in these downtown areas. Barry has 2 major low-income housing developments.
Well, or
Barry Town, I think one of them's in.
revitalizing those downtowns and doing a greater mix
I
of
will need
income.
your vote to extend their TIF bill.
Oh, yes. You have mine.
You have mine in theory. Thank you.
Yeah, but revitalize, I mean, we need to bring all the state workers back in here because Montpelier is suffering.
Mhm.
And I've tried for years to get state workers into downtown Barry, but we built a cafeteria so they don't come downtown. To date, it hasn't worked. The streets are full of traffic, but there is very few people on the sidewalk at any time in that city.
Mhm.
And I don't know. And it used to be a very, very vital downtown. Montpelier was where we rolled up the sidewalks. And I don't know how you revitalize.
Well, Cornerstone is, I mean, there are a bunch of.
Yeah, there's some good things happening.
Yeah, there are some good things, but
The
there's
Opera
still
House.
no one on the sidewalks.
Mhm.
But that's changed. Some municipalities do see a change. in
They
that.
do.
St. Albans is one.
Yes,
There's seen a
St. Albans has
significant
changed.
Right.
And the TIF, I think, was absolutely crucial for that
It
to
was.
happen. That was the keystone.
But
As it
part
is
of that is
for
the
Barry.
granite industry used to be the major employer.
Mhm.
In Springfield, you had the machine tool
Yeah.
industry. They went away. There's still granite industry, but it isn't what it was. The union jobs have gone away. The young people have now gone away to get jobs. And it's the jobs that need to come back. All the downtown, you know, kitsy little shops you put in aren't gonna work unless the people that live there make a wage that allows them to shop there. I used to say I could not afford to dress my children in downtown Montpelier, not unless I wanted them to have one shirt and one pair of pants, and that was it. And that is the economic reality we need to help towns deal with. We need to get those employment centers. St. Albans they're all going to Chittenden County to work because you don't have Eveready Battery's gone.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to accomplish in this committee in the grand scope of our jurisdiction. I mean, we're going to pivot after this bill to deal with economic development and all sorts of other issues. I think you heard from Matt Dunn about the exciting things happening with the tech industry in Springfield. I mean, there are, and the other cyclical thing that happens is, of course, as those jobs shift, some of the housing in these old downtowns, which is gorgeous old housing, is being.
But what I
snapped up
heard
and
Matt
redeveloped.
Dunn say is that in order to entice people into downtown Springfield from the job center up the
Right, up at,
interstate,
yeah.
he has to be able to offer market rate housing that is significantly lower than Hartford. And he can't build that. And
He can
Yeah.
build it, he can't afford, he needs help.
he can't build it at a rate that would allow him
Right.
to
Attractive.
rent it,
Yeah.
to make it attractive, to get people to come there. And that's what I want us to not do in trying to do all this dense zoning. I don't want us to end up clustering poorer people into old, less desirable areas.
You don't want to create ghettos.
I don't want to create ghettos.
That's worse.
And there's a huge balance in this bill of trying to give housing options. Some people do want density, they want to be closer to their workplace or transportation.
They do.
Some want a little less density and, balancing, still trying to find that starter, that half a duplex, that kind of thing.
Right.
So I hear you, you are a noble advocate for your community, and we'll stay in touch about that. And
My county.
well, your
Plus,
communities. I'm gonna make sure that Scott, could you see if we could get someone from A&R who does stormwater regulation?
and other permits.
Yeah.
My experience
Right,
with citing the
wastewater,
water
stormwater.
filtration plant,
Yeah.
same issue that came up last night.
Mhm.
One side of A&R says you have to do this, and the other side says, if you do this, we won't give you our permits.
So how high up the food chain should we go then? Do you wanna go into the
I
weeds
have-
with somebody or?
I just want to know what A&R
John.
permits you need and what impact, and I think impervious surface would be one of them. Denser zoning will likely trigger.
So the water person or the commissioner, John Belling?
I don't know.
Maybe both. Let's
Yeah,
aim
I
for
mean,
both.
I think
I
we
don't know
need
that
to
you
know,
can, but
in doing this,
yeah.
are we triggering A&R permits?
Mhm.
And is that likely to add to
Right,
the expense?
right.
Because our goal is to make it affordable. And I assume when you're starting talking middle
Mhm.
housing, you want to make it affordable without state subsidy.
Right.
You want this to be self-sufficient. And I think I don't want to put people between a rock and the hard place, telling them you have to zone for this, but
Right.
nobody will build because I can't afford to do it.
Yeah. So Scott, if it's not too much trouble, the commissioner and anyone he believes should come an X minute mark of this YouTube video might help them understand our discussion.
And I really just want to add something to that.
Yeah,
Stormwater utilities are a really important resource for communities because that's how you can get
Right.
fair revenue and contribution by the already existing impervious areas. And they're really good and they really work. So if A&R could speak to stormwater utilities, that would be stormwater utilities.
Oh, storm.
Yeah.
And
You
they're
think-
very common in other places. There are a
Yes.
few in Vermont. And what you do is you
Chittenden
assess. Yeah, well, we were working on one in Rockingham. And anywhere where there's a highway, you should do it, but that's a whole
But
conversation.
you have to understand the water table in Graniteville is in most people's basements. Literally, town, places, housing in Graniteville has a standing well in the basement, the older homes, because it is solid granite, obviously, and the water doesn't go anywhere. And traditionally, they've had a well in their basement and they pump the groundwater up to the
It's
first and
something.
second floor.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, it's a different than Addison County, which has clay, but they have granite.
right, but stormwater utilities are a way to fund those expenses in a fair way,
Because the,
outside of property taxes. And then just, it would be great if there was a way to have a sample community and we could, on which we could show the impact of what we're talking about, on an actual
Yeah.
map. I don't know if we could do that,
Real.
but just so that folks could visualize the impact of these changes
That's
that we're
useful.
making.
If you could ask Chris Cochran to
Sure.
help with that, that seems like
Like
the
a
best
real, a real.
person
That would
for
be-
planning and the visualization.
That would be
Because there
very
was some
helpful.
comment last night about fees charged in Rock of Ages, who owns all the granite quarries and the tops of all those granite mountains. And their concern was that our fees, and I think it was impervious surface fees, could put them out of business, and they are the employer. I mean, if they go,
Right,
that,
yeah.
and it's definitely we aren't building granite buildings anymore.
Right.
And so it's not what it was.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for that, Senator Cummings. And
I've done my, but to
we're
me,
gonna continue.
it
This
was-
is, yeah, this is,
Well, that was a helpful ground
Yeah,
truth,
it
and I
was
realized
grounded.
as you're speaking that I haven't sent 7.2 to some key people, I haven't done much outreach expecting people will weigh in, but it would be great for us all to do that ASAP.
well, in some of these sections, again, we could workshop with VLCT who sent us some things and have some thoughts. Jesse Baker, chairs their board and has been a town manager in 3 of our
well, she
communities.
was the assistant mom.
Montpelier, Winooski, South Burlington, I know 2 are not like the other, but I think I also have tried to just say when I can that this bill will go to other committees, and I don't want people to feel like if they don't get us some language by Tuesday, they can't weigh in.
Right, but we all have to be clear, as
Mhm.
clear as possible
Yes.
on what we're voting for.
Yes,
And the
absolutely.
impact on our cities and towns
Yes.
and on our environment.
Right.
So those are all the things we're
That's
weighing that have
right.
big impact here.
And I could use everyone's help to still do that in a time frame where we can get this bill to natural resources when they're done with the affordable.
Oh, then there's gonna be civil war in the finance committee.
Right.
Oh, yes,
Half
yes.
my committee is on natural resources, half is on here, and Senator Chittenden.
It's like
is gonna
waving the
be
white
on us.
flag in the middle. David, thanks so much for how patient you've been. I hope you've gotten something productive done.
Reading the newspaper.
Oh, well, good. Okay,
That's productive.
that's important.
Fill us in on what's happening to the rest of
Right.
us.
If you're able to mosey to the witness chair. We have a little less than half an hour only because we have to be at 10:25 in the chamber.
You do.
But we do have you tomorrow, David, and we really, really appreciate your patience.
I'm super flexible
Thank you.
in the morning right now. You guys
Okay.
are my priority, so
Thank you.
let me know
I-
how I can be helpful.
Wow, we
yeah.
like that. I'm gonna-
I'm looking at page 32 as where your sections start. And I just want to say, this is the time where we should either put funding amounts to things and somewhat agree on that, or take those sections out, because we don't see the sort of value or the push for those. And I think the funding amounts, I wouldn't call them arbitrary, but I would call them like a conversation with appropriations that is open right now. So because of BAA, I think we also, sometimes this committee gets kind of a universe in which to think about amounts of funding, and that's been in flux because of BAA. So we'll just have to live in that reality as well. Okay, so page 32, in my estimation, unless David, there's an earlier starting point.
You're right.
Single room occupancy is something I've held on to in this because of the properties that we've heard. Like, we talked to Office of Economic Opportunity yesterday, and they said they're in conversations. And they said one thing that would be helpful is funding. We don't have a dollar amount, and we haven't had, I've struggled, I've reached out for witnesses for this section and don't have anyone saying we need this amount of money in a pilot, but this amount would be great.
So what's your objective with this section? Your objective is to have a pilot that looks at how we could take some of our existing buildings we know exist, like DTC dorm space or Green Mountain dorm space, you know, or stuff that already exists that's single room, and how can we make it productive for either transition housing, recovery housing, supporting housing?
It's
All of that, is that what this is looking at?
I mean, it's basically SROs have been cropping up as a, you know, wouldn't that be nice if we had a kind of, if we took campuses, church properties, we heard the other day, they're looking at, this is on the radar of those offices for recovery supportive housing, things where someone needs.
But these are like, I mean, sadly,
Where
it's
are
like,
we in the bill?
Oh, sorry, page 32, section 28.
so the change from living in a motel
Mm-hmm.
is that the assumption is that single room occupancy housing has community kitchen, community dining, community laundry, community supportive services.
Probably, I mean, I think, I'm thinking,
You'd have to have
These are
that
a
because
diversity.
they don't
Oh.
have kitchens.
oh, I'm sorry, as opposed to some of these amenities in their rooms, like they might have a bathroom in their rooms for
But they
these
might
church
not.
properties, they might not. So it's the more dormitory style living, YMCA style living, that, you know, a boarding house type of thing.
But that all
Okay.
assumes you're gonna have your meals on the property.
Yes.
And
mhm.
so it assumes.
I don't
so
know,
that's
I
why
don't
we
know
need
if
a
it
pilot.
assumes that. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to assume anything.
There are
Right.
a
A
lot,
boarding house.
Right.
there were a lot of boarding facilities for older or disabled people in the city of Barry.
Mhm.
Mostly run by older women,
Mhm.
sometimes couples, who had the big old Victorian house downtown.
Right.
I worked with them when I worked at the adult daycare. They sent their folks to us. We kept them busy all day. They went home, they got their evening meal, they went to bed, they got up, they went. But it was this kind of housing.
Mhm.
Most of those people were aging out.
Mhm.
They needed to go.
Right.
Okay, and I asked Washington County Mental Health, why don't you take, because they're filling, you know, these are
Yeah.
folks that would go to a nursing home.
Right.
And then I was told that, well, if we take it over, we would have to put in elevators. We
Yeah.
would have to put in sprinklers. We would have to, and the cost is just prohibitive.
Mhm.
And so those are some of the places where regulations
Right.
get in, you know,
Mhm.
they're good, they're fire, they're safety,
Mhm.
but they're additions to what has been there traditional.
Right.
And
would money
it
help
has-
that?
it needs to have money to require, you know, to do that transition.
So I would either propose $1 million toward a pilot of this kind or striking it from the bill if we just are too worried that we don't know the uptake in the next year.
Yeah, okay, I just received, I went to a meeting with landlords over the weekend. Heard from an SRO person,
Oh, okay,
and I actually have an email I want to share with
Okay,
you.
great.
It's downloading.
okay, okay.
But
Did you send that to us? I didn't.
no,
see
I
that.
haven't yet. I
Okay.
just received it last night. I wanted to
Mhm.
read it because she wanted to know if she should provide more information, but I'm just gonna send it to you because she's comfortable with that.
Okay,
But essentially she's saying she purchased a 3-family building. She worked as a guardian ad litem, and so she was aware of the pressures on families. And so she's developed housing as SRO intentionally because it works, especially for folks getting out of incarceration,
right,
because they're not alone,
yeah,
and they have shared facilities.
yeah,
But in recent times, I don't know the details, what she says is, the support that she used to get from the parole officers has not been there.
Mm-hmm.
And so she is getting out of this
Yeah.
business and is actually selling one of the properties,
okay,
because of the lack of support.
right.
So I think I need to tell the probation folks
Mhm.
about this too, or we, do.
Probation,
I'm not
parole.
sure how to
I would
do that.
I would
But I'm gonna forward
it
you the
to,
email as soon as I can. which
and
is
we
like
can
any
help figure
minute.
out who to send that concern on to. Obviously, we don't want this bill to go to judiciary with a whole new topic, but
Right, but this is an
Yeah.
important resource.
Right, I
That
think that-
should be
right.
saved.
And a community that would be using
right.
conceivably SROs. So is this another thing that maybe the House could do a little more flushing out on it? Because it does
If
go
they
to
want
supportive
to.
housing
Yeah, right.
and recovery and alums exiting corrections.
Yes.
Right.
So it's got 3 big populations that this would be very useful for. And it strikes me that if the
So we
House,
could
yeah,
cut it out, send it to the House and say, this is something we didn't have time to workshop, but if you're doing recovery and supportive housing.
that this is an element that
yeah.
would be, we think would be important.
Yeah, I'll say at this point, I agree. It just, I don't want to send it to Senate Appropriations and say, like, we think this might be useful.
It's not enough.
It's not specific enough. Okay. So David, we're gonna reserve section 28. Reserve meaning, as folks may know, we're just trying not to change the section numbers, so we're just, until we have to, or whatever.
So
Mhm.
on the next, are we ready to move to?
Are we ready to move? Okay, so we're on section 29.
So this is what, I actually do think we should rename this to the renter rescue pool, because we have the landlord rescue pool that we heard about yesterday from Kathleen and Tyler. And this just is great, but I would title it for what it is, which is, this is really help for renters and helping mitigate before they get evicted and really helping mitigate the circumstances that are challenging them and helping keep them in their housing.
What is the title you would give it? I wasn't.
I would call it renter rescue or renter mitigation or renter rescue.
All right, we have, at least those of us that are new to this committee, haven't heard any testimony on this. I know
We
that
did yesterday, I thought.
Yeah, it's a little
I missed
confusing.
yesterday.
It's a little confusing.
Yeah, no.
Yes, you're right.
Community, I know the community action, the CAP agencies, at least Capstone, when I was there,
Mhm.
have whole programs where they start working with renters on
Mhm.
money management and eviction,
Mhm.
And this adds money for them to do that.
for them to do that, or
So let's take a step back, and David might be
Let's go
able
through
to
it.
help us all. If you want me to start with what I know, and then you can jump in and correct me. We did appropriate last year a pot of money for
you guys
landlords.
appropriated so much money last 2 years.
I don't even know,
can't keep track.
I honestly can't remember if it came from us or from the governor straight to appropriations, but
I think that
they, this was money appropriated to Vermont State, or somehow it got to Vermont State Housing Authority, who came in yesterday, to help people with damages before a Section 8 participant enters the home, with the security deposit for that Section 8
Okay, so it's
tenant.
helping you to
Right.
get those initial
Or
expenses.
if someone causes damage while you're the tenant, if the state pays this money, you can stay. There was some damage that needs to be repaired, but you're not going to be evicted for it because the state is assuming the risk for a tenant that might have a dangerous person in their
Yeah, usually
lives,
domestic
or
violence.
a child who broke something or something more nefarious. But if the state will help cover any risks that you have, so that Section 8 folks aren't seeing the refusal rate or their options really limited. That program started like yesterday. So it took a long time for them to get the program right and get the money out the door.
Yeah.
And when we had them in the witness chair yesterday, we heard a little bit about it's finally up and running.
Yeah, that I remember.
There's testimony, I believe, from
Yeah.
Kathleen on our website.
And do they want, yes, so they did put some written testimony. So then the question became, that was 5 million last year. Do we want to continue that in this budget? And then whether it's this amount of money, more, less, separate, they support what Vermont Legal Aid is requesting, which is money to go toward eviction mediation procedures. So if someone is facing eviction because of non-payment of rent, everyone can go through a process with money attached to it that helps deal with the non-payment of rent and keep someone from getting evicted. And that's the highlighted language. So what we don't have is a specific amount. If we want to continue the risk mitigation for Section 8 folks that just began, and we have a specific amount that we could discuss for this non-payment of rent diversion process. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay.
When I did my last pass through here, we did a lot of landlord tenant work.
Yes.
No housing. There are landlords from hell and there are tenants from hell. And there were several members of this committee who had been stuck big time with back rent
Right.
because they felt sorry for people and didn't evict them. And it's my meltdown yesterday. There's a balance between excusing a tenant who just smashes things, and helping a tenant who has a kid who broke a window, or we had a lot of testimony on people who let their boyfriend or girlfriend move in, and then they are selling drugs out of the apartment and no one can get them evicted. We're looking at this housing, but we haven't, there's a reason people with nice houses are not renting long time.
Absolutely.
That is more complex than just they don't want to.
Right.
There's a significant risk involved in renting long.
Right. And this is the first part, the governor, it's his request, this is his
Fine.
idea.
I think it's worth trying, but it needs to be.
How do you, landlord don't have to take people, or people don't have to rent? And this is saying, we're trying to take the risk out so that you'll take a chance on it.
And there are two programs Kathleen spoke about, the landlord, what they call the landlord
rental risk.
And then this 1.5 million is this piece, which she calls I've got it right here, which she is calling the eviction rescue fund, or the renter rescue fund. And she's urging us to do this to can prevent this up to $2,000 a tenant possibly can prevent costly eviction before it ever goes to court. The average grant of rent arrears is like $1,900, which is what she talked about yesterday. and the average amount of assistance for anybody for no cause of their own finds themselves in need to cure themselves before the landlord so that they don't get evicted. And I have found that very compelling. And I think I would support this. I think that both sides, so we do not see and hear the landlord piece, because that the goals of the landlord relief program, I think those are managed. I think she said, I don't know where that's managed, but that's not here.
It's the language is there, but there's no appropriation amount. It's part one versus
But
part two.
is this money being attached with some kind of counseling? Because there are people who get an unexpected medical bill, and they can't pay their rent.
Right,
And there are landlords,
yeah, that's
but
exactly
then there are
why.
people who are chronically
Right.
not paying their rent.
Right.
But they're doing other things, according to urban legends. So, you know, like buying snowmobiles, that
Yes.
frequently gets put up. Is there attached to this money some flow through agency like the CAPS that will be counseling you on budgeting? Or maybe, you know, this is how you manage your money so that you don't
Right.
get
The-
chronically
The
evicted.
tenant rights person, I'm gonna get her title wrong, Jean,
Oh, right.
is speaking at
Legal
our
aid.
hearing tonight from legal aid. Not that that's a huge amount of testimony, but legal, it was my call that eviction diversion as kind of what you're talking about. Can we work it out? Can we bring resources to bear? Can this person be
Yes.
known to the service agencies? That was forestalled because they originally wanted it to go through the courts. And at the beginning of session, the court said, we don't have time for that. And then they needed to find a new home for it. And by the time it came to us, that's a huge can of worms to open.
Yes, it is.
So they went straight to the House to talk about eviction diversion as an entire program. This
Okay.
1.5 million to say, you have to go through a process. It's not just, you know, what's known about this behind the scenes is that this is a diversion process specific to non-payment of rent, where legal aid and the economic opportunity partners would come to the table and say, we're gonna help you with this money, but we don't wanna see you back here, we can't keep doing this. So it's a small placeholder for a bigger conversation, and one that I think there's agreement on to prevent eviction related to non-payment of rent.
And it's two-sided, and she spoke to the VRAP side, and David, help us with this. Because this program that we put money aside for
VRAP. For
last,
those of
yes,
us that weren't here last year,
the
what is
Vermont Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And it was the money that we went to landlords to help work with tenants. It's federal money, right, David?
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong here.
Last year it was.
Federal money, right?
I think so.
Yeah. I
Yes.
think so. It was federal money that went to landlords to work with and prevent evictions and to compensate landlords. And however, again, to go to the challenge of, we enabled a lot of this, but this program only launched in January. They already have, the landlord relief program was officially launched January, received 37 applications for assistance to date, although it's too soon to report out any data and analysis related to this initiative. It's our expectation that funds will be fully expended within the 2-year grant term. So they're not asking for more money for the landlord relief program at the moment, but they are asking for renter mitigation fund and to set that up, because one side goes to the landlords and one goes to the tenants. So I think this is a good idea, and it mirrors the work that we're doing with landlords. And I think if we can prevent evictions in a market where there are no vacancies, this is a smart thing. This is a piece of low-hanging fruit we can address.
Are we saying simply in this bill
that we're giving that 1.5 million for the general purpose that is described here to housing and community development, and let them figure out how to do it.
Pretty much because they've been working with all the partners on how to do
Without,
it.
you know,
and they all
there's no
have
detail
understanding.
here, there's no, we don't
Yeah.
know what the administrative expense is.
Right.
And has the department indicated that they want it and can do it?
Josh was here yesterday, and that was my assumption when
Yeah.
Kathleen
Yeah.
was testifying.
Yeah, that's.
Josh was very supportive.
Mhm.
So we can confirm that, but my sense was Josh was very
They don't
supportive.
need $1.4 million of staff time to do it.
Right.
He did.
They're gonna shop it out to legal aid the OEOs.
Well,
Well, and to the Vermont Housing Authority,
Mhm.
that Kathleen was taking that piece on, because it's mostly Section 8. And
Well,
so-
that's the money that's already out there, but they want to partner with all the people who can help tenants with
Exactly.
eviction diversion.
Exactly.
And Jean should speak to that tonight. This was, this was a request from legal aid supported by the larger government.
Yeah, and look at Kathleen's piece on our website from yesterday's testimony, because it's good, it helps.
So we could leave this section alone and say, we know their money just went out the door that already exists in the program. It's our intent to keep doing the risk mitigation, but to leave the 1.5 million as is for now and let other committees decide if more is needed. And you want to change the title.
I just want to suggest that we expand the allowable use of the funds to include things like education for tenants, because that can go a long way. They're just explaining how to be a good tenant. There actually are educational programs on that. And so providing those materials can help these other experiences not happen.
Right.
We,
They might,
less expensive.
yeah, I think they might do the education when someone's in crisis.
Right, but
But I think, I don't want to add money that,
no, I didn't want to add
Or
money. I
like
just
anything,
wanted
right.
to
Yeah, I think
include
that's a
the
good point.
scope, because
Mhm.
with little money, you can let people know ahead of time what the expectations are.
I think we try to be as broad as possible because it's just, if such funding will preserve a tenancy. Like, I think at the end of the day, we don't want people to get evicted when resources could be brought to bear, and they're
Understand.
gonna bring resources to bear. in the process.
On the title, just because I know we're
Yes.
getting short on time, Kathleen uses, because it cuts both ways, landlords and tenants.
Mhm.
I would say, propose that we call it what she does, which is the Eviction Rescue Fund,
So rental risk mitigation pool and eviction rescue fund.
or just call it the Eviction Rescue Fund, because it cuts both for helping landlords with
Okay.
with preventing evictions and helping renters prevent evictions. And in future, even though we've already appropriated the money for VRAP and stuff for the landlords, in future, this is, I believe, David, correct me if I'm wrong, this addresses in this section both. It
The
doesn't
existing
refer to, yeah, exactly,
Rental risk mitigation.
Yes.
It refers to it and it doesn't appropriate anything right now
exactly.
because they just got the money out the door. So that could change it along the way,
So-
but
I would just call it the Eviction Rescue Fund, and it helps landlords and tenants, hopefully.
does anyone have a problem with that? Let's see if we can get to the home share piece and maybe the mobile home piece, but
An employer,
that turned into the rental revolving.
oh, right.
fund. And I took the liberty of taking out conversion, like money for conversion of properties, because they just said it would just help to get the regulation out of the way. That's better than money for us. So that's, hence you saw a new Ellen section on those.
Why is home sharing limited to or specified for central and southern Vermont only?
Because the other areas are served.
That's
Yeah.
what I
Yes,
We
assume.
aren't
Yeah.
served as
Yeah.
a-
That's what I assume. but I
We
wasn't-
have this, you heard from both home share
Mhm.
they're very different models, but they both are intending to try and do the same thing for in different avenues, and this will enable both of them to expand.
Well, is there
our-
money, all I'm really asking is for the rest of the state, is there money someplace to do that?
The two in
Statewide.
They have to
Kind of,
apply to
yeah.
get this.
So we know of two organizations that might apply for this money that serve those two areas. Home Share Vermont said, what you really want to help us expand home share. We have a charge in central Vermont. We don't have a position. We serve, the Northwest.
What I'm really asking is about the rest of the state, other than central and southern Vermont.
is there a program and or money available to deal with home sharing in those areas as well?
We've never appropriated as a state to home sharing programs directly.
That's where I was not aware of it, which is
Right.
why I asked, why is this central in Southern Vermont?
This
only?
was kind of a new, we could just say to expand home sharing opportunities positions and not be more specific. This would probably go to the two entities that have said, we want to do a better job serving
Well,
Central.
if other entities were aware
Right,
that such funds were
Mhm.
available, they might do it. But
Right.
here, to specify that you're gonna give the money to two people in a
Mhm.
limited area of the state in the
Right.
bill without any notice to anybody else, I
Mhm.
just would question.
that's fair. I mean, Home Share Vermont, I think, tried to tell us if there was anybody else in this space. It's
And
kind of
we-
a niche thing that's happening.
And we identified the other home share group.
But we took it out of the bill, which I think is good.
Yeah, we could,
We-
we took out
it's
specificity
not
about going to
supposed to
home
go.
share.
Again, if you're gonna say, we're gonna allocate $200,000 to expand home sharing opportunities in Vermont, I'm fine with that.
So, okay. So
Yeah.
can we say home sharing opportunities? I
Yes.
don't know if it needs to stay in Vermont, but if it needs to stay in Vermont, that's.
Now, hopefully we're not doing home sharing. in Hampshire.
Right, exactly.
Depends on who we want to send out.
Yeah, it would be a shame if the funding went to Chittenden County because they already have home sharing.
Yeah,
But-
I mean, that's, I think, what this
Well,
is
the
trying
bottom
to
is home share
Underserved
Vermont should be
areas of the
statewide, but they
state,
like
unserved
haven't had the
areas of
resources
the
and they haven't
state.
come in and asked for them either. So I said, do you want to come in and talk about home sharing? Because we should do more home sharing.
Right.
you
It's
know?
one of our low hanging fruits.
Yeah.
I mean, we,
So David, does that change? Make sense?
Positions, period.
We could say home sharing opportunities, period, and take out positions in case. I mean, opportunities seems all encompassing. It sounded like that was your suggestion.
I would then say, and statewide, serving all counties of the state or something, because what,
To expand
You
home
know,
sharing opportunities
Franklin-
statewide?
yeah,
Okay,
because my understanding is that the Northwest is well served by the
Right.
home sharing, and that the rest of the state isn't.
yeah.
So
So we could just say statewide.
they're beginning. I mean, most of our
Home
senior
sharing
centers are
opportunities
now-
statewide.
Is your senior center working on this?
I
Ours
don't
is.
know.
I think we will have to stop there.
Oh my God, it's already 10:20.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
We got 5 minutes to get
Exactly.
organized and get upstairs.
And
Hit blue.
you've been so
That's
patient,
it.
David. We're probably gonna take a half an hour from you tomorrow, but so I'm telling the committee to, like, let's try to. These are important sections, so we're not gonna rush things, but, let's see if you can preview what's there and get any questions answered, flag anything.
And one thing I sent to the committee, an NCSL brief as of yesterday showing affordable housing bills legislation in all the states, including those that have passed, those that have affected,
here it is.
those that have failed.
Okay,
So that will help
okay,
us
thank
look
you.
at all the stuff that we forgot in this bill.
Right.
I hate to
Thank
say
you.
this, Senator Brock, but it's not a